I know I'm super late to add some spooky to your feeds, but I have a question for you all. Why are we addicted to the one thing our brains are programmed to avoid? The true question is not why we pay, but why do we constantly seek that adrenaline rush that horror provides? But before we dissect the why, we have to understand the what. Fear is control. It is the brain's forced reaction to a perceived threat. And in fiction, that threat is a weapon delivered through specialized rounds. You got the blunt force trauma of the jump scare, designed to bypass thought and trigger an immediate biological panic. And then there's body horror, which targets the fundamental human fear of losing control over our own physical form, making the violation permanent and visceral. And then there's the most insidious form of fear, in my opinion, the one that works in silence, the ambiance or psychological horror, the creeping sense that something is deeply wrong, often relying on unsettling stillness, subtle sound design, or the simple anxiety of the unknown. And then lastly, we have cosmic horror, which targets a far deeper existential anxiety. This form of terror forces us to confront our own insignificance against entities and realities so vast, so ancient, and so indifferent that our very existence feels like a meaningless accident. It is this systematic, controlled manipulation delivered through these different types of aesthetic terror that's at the heart of the fictional horror experience, and we submit ourselves to it for that profound catharsis that comes right after. And yes, I know, there are many more types of horror, but I just named a few to get the conversation going. The reason we are willing to submit ourselves to this fear comes down to a fundamental human need: practicing survival. Look at our fascination with true crime, disaster films, or even the rush of a haunted house. These are all controlled environments where we can test our decision-making skills without consequence. Our brains process the scenario, and we engage a protective instinct. This engagement releases adrenaline and dopamine, creating that rush. In essence, we are rehearsing the worst case scenario from the comfort of our own couch, fulfilling a deep evolutionary need to stay vigilant while ultimately confirming our own immediate safety. This brings us to the profound catharsis that makes horror so appealing in fiction: controlled risk. The risk is palpable, the fear is real, but the consequences are zero. The power dynamic in this exchange is completely reversed. The audience is in control. We can pause the game, close the book, or turn off the screen. Every time the killer is caught, the sun rises, or the game is completed, we receive a powerful affirmation. Fictional horror allows us to confront the worst possible fates: loss, violation, and insanity. And of course, we walk away unscathed. We love horror because every time we finish it, we are proving to our most primitive monkey brain that I survived that and now I am safe. Film and television are arguably the masters of manipulation because they control the most crucial element: time. When you sit in a theater or watch a series, you are a passive observer, and the medium exploits that passivity through meticulous pacing and auditory suspense. A great horror movie like the one from the Conjuring franchise doesn't rely solely on the payoff. It thrives on the build-up. The slow camera pan, the subtle shift in the music score, or the moment the character turns the wrong way. The ambiance is weaponized, forcing your brain to predict the jump scare, causing more anxiety in the anticipation than in the final reveal itself. This forced passivity allows these mediums to perfectly execute both sudden and insidious forms of fear. A series like Stranger Things is brilliant because it blends multiple approaches. You get the visceral body horror and shock of the Demogorgon, but you also get the creeping cosmic horror aspect of the Upside Down. A reality so vast and indifferent it threatens to erase the town's sanity. The experience is fully externalized. You are relying entirely on the director's timing. This relies on a separate authority to control the flow of fear. The sudden sound, the abrupt music swell, is what makes the theatrical horror experience so potent and uniquely terrifying. When we pivot to the mediums of anime and manga, we are looking at a space where the East, specifically Japan, has established a distinct mastery over horror. This depth is not accidental. It is often steeped in cultural traditions, where folklore is rife with unsettling beings like yokai and the pervasive concept of onryo, or vengeful spirits. This cultural context gives creators a narrative foundation rooted in existential dread and societal anxieties, making the fear feel older and more visceral. The real terror, however, comes from the medium's visual freedom. Unlike live action films, anime and manga face virtually no constraints on budget or physics. This allows for unparalleled mastery over body horror and psychological distortion. A mangaka like Junji Ito can commit fully to the bizarre and the impossible, depicting biological transmutations or patterns of madness that are horrifyingly precisely because they are rendered with immaculate, unblinking detail. The horror is not the quick jump scare, it's the unavoidable, drawn out revelation of complete violation, be it the loss of one's humanity in a transformation or the realization that the physics of the world have fundamentally gone up. Finally, we arrive at video games, the medium that transcends passive viewing and forces the fear directly onto the player. The unique terror here stems from agency and the loss of control. Unlike movies, where you can yell at the character to turn around, in a game, you are the one responsible for turning around. Games exploit this by weaponizing scarcity, limiting your ammunition, your health, or your save states, forcing you into a constant state of anxiety over resource management. Take the simplicity of Five Nights at Freddy's. Your resources are power and time. The tension is built entirely around the necessity of active defense and the imminent scarcity of power, forcing your defenses down. Sorry about that. Anyway, contrast this with a psychological game like Silent Hill, where the ambient fear is amplified because your mind is constantly working to solve the puzzle of your own deteriorating sanity. By placing the consequences of failure directly on your shoulders, video games convert fictional fear into genuine, high-stakes psychological tension, proving that the most terrifying thing in a horror game is the own player's psyche. So back to that question, why do we keep coming back? It's because the fear you just experienced, from the calculated jump scare in your favorite movie to the psychological tension of a video game, it's entirely a controlled manipulation. Horror fiction is the only safe space where you can voluntarily submit yourself to the feeling of utter powerlessness and biological panic. Every medium we discussed is simply a different delivery mechanism for that one powerful controlled feeling. We continue to pay into it because ultimately, this is a psychological survival exercise. It's a test where we can confront the worst possible outcomes, loss of sanity, physical violation, or utter insignificance against a cosmic threat, and walk away unscathed. The true, profound reward of horror is not just a rush, but the final, undeniable affirmation it gives us every single time we finish. You made it. You survived. Which of these mediums, film, manga, or video games, has the highest success rate in manipulating your fear? Drop a comment below with your favorite horror type and the franchise that always makes you check your hallway when using the bathroom. And as always, stay surviving, stay spooky, and this is your captain, signing off.